Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. I've had some nice beers from these guys over the last few years, a few different styles, and I would say that this brewery aren't scared to try different things, and that's one of the reasons why you should keep an eye out for what they're doing, because you will find some interesting beers from them. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that can be very nice if it's done right. It's a style that you don't come across all that often, so I have to say I'm quite curious to see what this one has in store for us. So hopefully it makes for another interesting review, hopefully it's a good beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So let's see how we go. For this review then, we are going to head up to Dundee and we're having a look at another beer from 71 Brewing. So this particular beer is called Outer Galactic. It comes in at 7.5% ABV and they're describing this one as an Imperial dry hopped Pilsner. So yeah, not all that often you come across Imperial Pils, especially in Scotland actually. I think I've maybe only had one Imperial Pils from Brewdog before, come to think of it, but I could be wrong there. But yeah, not that often that you will come across an Imperial Pils, especially so here in Scotland actually. Nice to return to 71 Brewing again after a little while. I'd reviewed one of their beers when I was home at Christmas last time, and there was actually quite a wee selection of 71 Brewing things in Sainsbury's, and I'm pretty sure that's where I picked up this beer. In fact, they had two, they had a pale ale and IPA, and I think this one, and this is the one that kind of stuck out to me because it's quite an unusual style. But yeah, hopefully we can review a few more things from 71 Brewing over the next little while. But let's see how we get on with this one then. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from 71 Brewing before, and you will no doubt see some more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, but quite regular at the moment because I'm enjoying a wee bit of time in the motherland. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about 71 Brewing. So 71 Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Dundee, and the company was founded by Duncan Alexander and Mark Griffiths, both of whom come from a background in the IT industry. But Duncan was visiting family in Melbourne in Victoria in southeastern Australia when his home brewing cousin took him to White Rabbit Brewery, and it was that visit there and that kind of exposure to what beer could actually be that really kind of spurred his interest in craft beer. So when he got back home, he went down to Watford in England and he bought a small one-barrel brew kit back in 2011. Then he set it up as a communal brewery in Portobello in Edinburgh, and he said that this experience kind of gave him the platform to experiment with brewing, try brewing lots of different styles, and also let people try his beers and learn from their feedback. But this venture that he had came to a sort of natural end in 2015, and at this point he realised he didn't want to continue as a software engineer because it was taking him further and further into finance jobs, which he didn't want to do. But he contacted Mark at this point, who was an old colleague and someone who he knew ran businesses very well. So together they secured funding from Scottish Enterprise and other companies as well, and they set up their brewery next to where the old Blackness Foundry was, and there they've got 7,200 square feet of space and a 25 hectolitre brew house. But the foundry was headquartered at number 71, and this is where the brewery takes its name from, and at the moment they are actually going through an expansion phase, and they also brew beers for a number of other breweries as well, including Vault City. I'm not sure if Holy Goat actually brew their beers in the 71 Brewing facility as well, but yeah, there's quite a few breweries here in Scotland brew their beers at 71 Brewing. I know that Dead End Brew Machine have done it. I know that yeah, Vault City have been brewing up there, and there's a few others obviously brewing some stuff there too. But yeah, quite a big facility they have up there actually, and you can go and check my out and about video there. There's also a 71 Brewing tap room on site that you can check out. But as of September 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 115 different kinds of beer under the 71 Brewing name. And as I say, quite a variety of different styles available from these guys. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about them for the moment. If you want to learn more about them, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd, and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that is it for your history section of the video. Check out all those links. So let's get on and have a look at the beer itself then. So before we open it up, I'll let you have a little look at the artwork. There we go, just check that the camera is focusing there. Still love this camera, by the way, the picture is awesome. But yeah, as you can see, I think they've changed the artwork on the 71 Brewing beers very slightly since we last reviewed one of their beers. Let me just bring that in. So there you can see the 71 Brewing symbol there, and you can see they tend to put 2 letters from the names of the beer on this right hand side of the can now. But there you can see Outer Galactic Imperial dry hopped Pilsner, 7.5% ABV, plain silver cap on this one, although the light's reflecting quite a bit off there. There you go. But yeah, it says on the back here, Outer Galactic, an amped up Imperial Pilsner with a rich, complex malt profile dosed with masses of American and New Zealand hops. Big, bold and hoppy bitterness awaits. So yeah, pretty cool actually, but 7.5% ABV. I think this one should be pretty nice. I think I paid about £2.60. Well, this was in Sainsbury's, so yeah, I think I paid about £2.60 for this beer, maybe a little bit more because it seems maybe £2.75. So that is maybe about €3.75, something like that, maybe €3.50, €3.75. So somewhere in the region of about what? That's going to be €3.75 is going to be somewhere in the region of like $5 American maybe, if I'm remembering the conversion rightly. And for Swedish kroner, yeah, if it's €3.75, then it will be, yeah, it'll be about 38 kroners or something like that. So yeah, pretty impressive actually. But yeah, 440 milliliter can, this one, just to give you a bit of stats on the beer because I wrote these down from the website. So as we say, it's 7.5% Imperial Pilsner. This one's hopped with Columbus, Citra, Cryo Mosaic and Motueka, all hops that we know quite well. Columbus is a good bittering hop, it gives you that nice big kind of spicy floral aromaticity. Citra, again American, 14% alpha acid, mangoes, nice kind of lemon limey zest to it as well quite often. Mosaic, 14% alpha acid, big juicy tangerines, and then Motueka is from New Zealand, about 8% alpha acid if memory serves me correctly. Quite a few New Zealand hops are lower in their alpha acid, and remember, the alpha acid is what determines how bitter a beer is going to be, or how bitter a hop is going to be, I guess we could say. But Motueka is going to give you a lovely kind of juicy limey character. But the malt base in this one is Pilsner, caramel aromatic, Carapils, Munich, Vienna and acidulated malts. So quite a diverse malt base for an Imperial Pils, I have to say, but I've not seen too many recipes for brewing this beer style. But let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. The Outer Galactic Imperial Pilsner at 7.5% ABV from 71 Brewing in Dundee. Let's get this out and into the glass then. So, oh, it's quite coppery actually with its colour. But you would expect that, to be honest, from an Imperial Pils. You would expect it to just be a little bit darker in colour compared to a normal Pilsner. It actually looks quite like a West Coast IPA in terms of colour, to be quite honest with you. So let me just line this up again so that my OCD is happy. And there we go. So, well, as you can see, this beer has poured to be quite a nice colour, in fact. So if I shine the light through this, it's actually a very rich kind of amber colour, to be honest with you. Really akin to a kind of West Coast double IPA, come to think of it. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, quite a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, and the head, incidentally, is just shy of one finger, and I'd say it's actually got a very light kind of beigey sort of fawn colour to it, this one. It's definitely not kind of perfect white or whatever, but it's definitely a little bit of a kind of beigey fawn kind of colour there. So I'll just let you have a little look at that, bring it up there, but you can see it is quite sort of foamy, medium-sized bubbles in there. But you can see the beer does have a good degree of kind of natural haze to it. But yeah, I would describe this one as a very kind of rich amber colour. It really is akin to a sort of you know, American West Coast double IPA. It really, really looks like this kind of beer. The sort, even with the kind of natural haze and stuff that this one has. So that's pretty impressive. But remember, the colour of your beer is determined by, first off, the type of malts that you use. This is going to determine the magnitude of your colour, and I suspect a lot of the colour in this one will be coming from the Vienna malt, probably. It's most likely the Vienna malt that's giving you this colour. The other ones will contribute a little bit, but I don't think quite as much. But the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role. I don't know for certain, but I think for an Imperial Pils, you're probably still looking at a 60 to 90 minute wort boil with these beers. But the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you'll get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging and adjuncts that you any barrel aging you do and any adjuncts that you put in are also going to affect the colour of the beer. But when it comes to an Imperial Pils, you don't really have to care about those variables. Normally that's sour beers. But like I say, the colour of this one is pretty damn impressive actually. So yeah, interesting for sure. Didn't expect it to be quite this dark, but yeah, because of the higher alcohol content, usually they will put some sort of biscuity or caramelly malt in an Imperial Pils just to kind of cover the booziness a little bit. So yeah, it's quite an interesting style from that perspective. You have to get the balance right in the malt base for these beers to work properly. But yeah, that's enough about the appearance of this one then. We've kind of said what we need to say about that. But let's take a look at the aroma then and see how we go on that side. It smells pretty nice actually. Yeah. Yeah, I do like how that goes together. You know, it's kind of interesting because you get this blend of, like, you know, American, New Zealand, New World hops, I guess you could say, but you also get that kind of classic Central European malt base to it, which is kind of interesting. The acidulated malt, I have to say, is something that I'm very, very curious about when it comes to this beer. I'm curious to see how that's going to affect the overall kind of vibe of the beer, because I remember it was Magic Rock always used to love putting acidulated malt in these in their beers. And it gave you this kind of, it was kind of interesting the effect that it would have, because it would give you this kind of just sharp citrusy kind of thing to the malt. But yeah, you can smell the backbone of this beer. It is really quite interesting. So at the back of this beer, or as the backbone of this beer I should say, you can smell that kind of nice lagery smooth base to it, which is interesting. And you can smell a bit of crispness to this one, but it's certainly got a wee bit of that more kind of boozy brown sugary note to it. The hoppy character is quite bright and grassy in a sense, and you've also got some nice kind of more oily fruity characters to this one. So that's a basic, very kind of slight, you know, overview of it at the beginning. But let's delve into that aroma a bit more in depth and see what we can get. So yeah, if you take that aroma in a bit more deeply, you can smell that nice kind of wet bready sort of thing that you often get in some of these lager beers. So the backbone of this beer is undoubtedly bread crust. You can smell that nice kind of brown bready bread crust just forming the backbone of this beer. You can smell a mix of, you know, kind of straight up brown bread, wholemealy bread in there, also a little bit of a kind of smoother white bread as well. You can certainly get that in the middle of the nose with this one. The acidulated malts, I don't get that so much, but you can detect a little bit of it kind of at the top of the nose, if that makes sense. But I certainly get a nice little bit of kind of brown sugar out of this beer. You can smell a little bit of a straight up caramel in there. The caramel almost comes across as being a little bit medicinal in nature and a little bit candied, if that makes sense. You know, it kind of reminds me of some of the candy sugar notes that you get out of the likes of a triple or a double from Belgium. You know, these rock candy kind of sugars and stuff that they put in those beers. But the malty base reminds me of that a little bit, but you can certainly smell like a straight up caramel and a bit of booziness out of the beer. But there's also a nice little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive sort of quality with this beer as well. So I really like that nice kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing that the beer has. But certainly with an Imperial Pils, you would expect a little bit more brown sugar to this beer because of the alcohol. 7.5%. I've not had enough of these beers to really remember what a sort of rough scale for an Imperial Pilsner should be, but 7.5% I think might be towards the heavier end of the spectrum with these. I think 8% would be as high as you might dare go with an Imperial Pils, I would think, without it just being overly boozy. But the malty character in this one is quite nice. You get a good little bit of that kind of big boozy brown sugar, you know, like I say, some nice McVitie's digestive biscuit, and the Vienna malts and the Munich malts in this one are really giving you a little bit of a base. And at the same time, if you take the aroma in quite deeply, you get that nice kind of crispness that you expect of the Pilsner malt itself. But let's move on to the hoppy side of the aroma then. Yeah, the hoppy side of the beer is kind of what you'd expect. So there's a wee bit of earthiness coming out of this one. I think it's the mosaic that's going to give you that. Mosaic always gives you just a little touch of earthiness, but there's a big green component to this one. Nice big floral aromatic notes out of this one. Yeah, a nice big kind of floral aromaticity to the beer. And it's quite deep as well at the same time, but you also at the front of the nose get a nice big zesty, grassy quality to it, which I can certainly appreciate. So yeah. So yeah, the green component for me, I'd say the floral, it just really has a nice big kind of floral depth to it, which I like, and that's the thing that lingers there. There's a wee bit of earthiness to back up. There's a wee bit of grassy zestiness, so it's got a wee bit of everything that you would want, I would say. So the floral, the green component of this one for me is nice, but all four of the hops, I should say, sorry, are going to contribute that. But you can smell the Columbus is the thing. I suspect the Columbus has been used as the early addition hop in this beer, and then the other ones have been added a bit later on to give you more flavour and aroma. Remember, it's the early addition hops that give you your bitterness. After the hour point in the wort boil, that's when you start to get more aroma and flavour coming out of the hops, and then you've got dry hopping going on afterwards. So it does say a dry hopped one, so potentially all three of those hops have only been dry hopped, and it's Columbus as the bittering hop. But we'll maybe be able to figure that out from the taste of the beer. But fruity wise, this is very nice. This is very, very nice. So the fruity side of the beer does have that big oily, you can smell that big oily tangerine note from the mosaic in this one. That's the backbone of the fruity part of the beer. But you can smell the lime from the Motueka as well. The lime is kind of mixing in with the kind of grassy notes at the front of the nose. You've got that big oily tangerine orange in there as well, but you do get a fair wee bit of tropical fruit behind it. You can smell a wee bit of an oily mango and passion fruit in there, but I think for me it's the mosaic that takes the lead in this one, and I think the Motueka is doing a lot of it. It's actually quite a citrusy, zesty kind of thing, but then you get the oily nature of the tangerine holding the whole thing together. But yeah, it's interesting how that goes together in this one. But yeah, the Citra, I think, is giving you a wee bit of passion fruit and a wee bit of mango, but the Columbus is giving you the bitterness. Then the mosaic and the Motueka are the ones that are taking the lead in this beer and making it a more kind of oily, citrusy affair, I guess. But Citra is also going to contribute to the lemon limey character in this beer as well. Well, the lime that we're getting from the Motueka, I should say. But yeah, definitely an interesting aroma in this one. And if you do get an Imperial Pils, think about it a little bit, because you don't find these beers all that often. But let's put the rest of it in the glass, and then we'll have a taste of this one and see how we go. So let me just line that up so that my OCD is happy as always, and we'll get stuck into this beer. So always take a bit of time to ponder over that aroma, as I say. But this one is the Outer Galactic, a 7.5% Imperial Pils from 71 Brewing in Dundee here in Scotland. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Ooh, that's actually quite nice. It's certainly, I've had a couple of Imperial Pils in Sweden recently, and they have been a bit more. This one's certainly got a little bit more of a kind of amber lager character to it, and a little bit of the Vienna kind of thing. So, I would wonder from the flavour makeup of this one, you maybe could argue that it's not an Imperial Pils, it is an Imperial lager of some description, but yeah, the lager kind of the malty notes you get out of this one are really quite nice, actually. But yeah, I do like how it goes about its business. This one, it's a nice beer, actually. But you can tell that it's a lager because of the kind of lightness and crispness. But at the same time, it certainly has a wee bit more of that kind of oily character that you'd expect of a more amber lager, of course. Now remember, the definition of a lager beer is a cold temperature fermentation, bottom fermenting yeast. The fermentation takes place between 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. An ale, it's top fermenting yeast, and it takes place between 15 to 18 degrees Celsius normally. But yeah, that's your basic definition of a lager. You've got lots of different types of lagers. You've got the Helles, the Dunkel, the Schwarzbier, the Bock, the Doppelbock, the Märzen, and so on from Germany. In the Czech Republic, you've got the Svetli, Letzak, Cherny, Tmavy, all of these things. You've got the Vienna lager, the Pilsner is another kind as well. Lots of different types of lager beers. But the Imperial Pils and the Imperial, the IPLs and stuff like this that have come on a little bit later, these seem to be more kind of American takes on the styles to just kind of bolden them up a wee bit. But I think this one is a nice big kind of oily sort of thing. This is a little bit more like a kind of Imperial. It's a little bit like I think it's probably more similar to the Czech amber lager, which is the Letzek. It's not really like a Märzen or anything like this. It's not crisp enough to be a Märzen. It's a little bit more of a kind of oily thing. So this is somewhere, if we're talking about where this beer would lie in terms of lagers, it would set the malt base is somewhere between like a German. No, it's not crisp enough to be a Märzen, as I say. It's a little bit between a Vienna lager and also a little bit between a little bit of a Czech Letzak, I would think. So yeah, it's quite an interesting malt base you have in this, but it works. It really does work. So yeah, interesting kind of things to think about with this beer. But yeah, it is quite nicely done, I have to say. So let's first impression of this beer, as I say, it's a nice big kind of oily lagery malt base, but it's got a nice kind of smooth green component to it as well, and also some big oily fruity characters, which I really like. And it's one of these beers that actually, when you think about the aroma and what transpires in the flavour, it translates over quite well. So let's break that down for you then. So straight away across the middle third of your palate, then you can feel that nice kind of bread crusty backbone to the beer. That is the backbone of this one. And that's the middle third and the back third of your palate. On top of that, you can feel the kind of smoother wholemealy brown bread, which the Vienna malts that are going to give you that. It does give you that wee bit of graininess that you quite often find in the Vienna lagers. So if you watch my Austrian Vienna lagers that I reviewed recently, you'll know what I'm talking about there. But on top of that, you do get a little bit more of a kind of white bready character, which will be the Munich malt. And those three things together, I think, form the backbone of the beer. I'm getting a wee bit of gas out of this one, actually. But yeah, happens sometimes when you're doing reviews, of course. But yeah, the kind of bread crusty backbone in this beer, I think it does get a wee bit more kind of grainy the further you go into it, but the bready character, smooth brown bread, lovely white, smooth bready character in this one, and it's pretty nice, I have to say. Let's break the beer into the thirds then, as we always do, the thirds of the palate. So if we talk about the middle third of your palate then, if you go towards the front half of that middle third of your palate, you get one or two little woody elements underneath the beer, or underneath the flavours that we're talking about there. But then on top of the white bready note, you can feel a little bit of that acidulated malt in there. The acidulated malt almost gives you this kind of slightly waxy mouthfeel, and you can just feel there's a wee bit of a kind of citrusy, almost very, very slightly sour kind of thing to the beer. But it's the acidulated malts, it really is more of a kind of, it feels like you've got a little bit of wax on your tongue, and the water just, the liquid just goes right over it, and it gives you a wee bit of a citrusy zest almost at the same time. That's what I always find acidulated malt does, and you get a wee bit of that vibe the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, and that's almost right in the dead centre of all these kind of bready notes. But on top of all of that, you get that big oily kind of caramelly note out of the beer, and it's a little bit of a kind of grainy caramel, if you like, almost a little bit like heather honey in a way, with that slight grainy spice to it, but not heather spice obviously. So yeah, that big, in the middle of your tongue, you've got that big circle. Which is brown sugary, and then you can feel right in the dead centre of that, that's where the concentration of the caramel is, and that's the booziness of the beer. But as you move further out from that, you get more of a biscuity, McVitie's digestive sort of thing coming out of this beer, and I really like how that goes about its business in this one. So yeah, the The malty side of this beer, I think, is very, very nicely done. So, yeah, I have to say I like that about this one. As I said, it's probably leaning a bit more towards the Vienna lager, to be honest. It's like a slightly sweeter take on the Vienna lager. It's got a bit of the graininess underneath, but a bit of the kind of more oily character, as I say, of the I suppose the Czech late sack is going to be a bit more yeasty and things. So yes, it's quite an oily malt base that you have in this one, but it certainly does work, and I like how it goes about its business. We can say that, but I think we've said everything we really need to say about the middle third of the palate just now. So let's move on to the back third of the palate. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of bread crusty kind of thing there. You've got a little bit of a bready build up, a bit more of a grainy bread crust, and then into the back third of your palate, again you've got that bread crusty base, brown bread, white bread, and then on top of that you can feel that there's a few more kind of yeasty elements coming out of the beer. So yeah, I think you can feel that the flavour of the beer is a bit taller. The flavour of the beer is a little bit taller on the back third of your palate, but yeah, you can feel when you come further forward on the palate with this beer, the flavour just condenses down a little bit, as it always does, but into the middle third of your palate you can feel this beer, it actually is very dense, I think, in terms of flavour concentration in the middle third of your palate. But it works pretty well, I have to say. So thumbs up to 71 Brewing from this. I have actually found that these guys do well when it comes to malty lagers. The first beer I tried from these guys was a German Dunkel. And again, it's not a style that you come across all that often in Scotland, and that was why I picked that beer. So these guys, I think, know what they're doing with the slightly maltier lagers, and this beer kind of shows that, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think we've covered the malty, yeasty side of this beer quite nicely, to be honest with you. Let's focus on the hoppy side of it then. So back corners of the palate, you certainly get a wee bit of earthiness out of there, and that's going to come both from Columbus and the Mosaic, I would say. But as you move further forward, you can feel you get more and more of a kind of big, slightly dank floral aromaticity. You can feel that a little bit spicier on the front kind of corners of the palate, but round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit brighter and kind of grassier in a sense. You get a wee bit more of a kind of zesty grassiness out of this one, but a nice deep floral aromaticity, which is great. So yeah, I think it goes about its business quite nicely on the green side of things. But the Columbus, I think, is a good choice of bittering hop for this one. But the grassiness works out quite well. So the Columbus, I think, is the thing that's taken the lead when it comes to the green component. But Mosaic, with the earthiness, is showing its head a little bit too. But let's focus on the front third of your palate then, and the fruity notes. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you've got a little bit of a kind of bready build up in there and a wee bit of a graininess. And then the base of that front third of your palate is a more kind of smooth brown bready kind of character, and sitting on top of that you've got a nice kind of oily brown sugary, not oily, brown sugary, brain's not working, you do get a wee bit of brown sugariness creeping into the beer at the back of that front 30 palate, but you've got that nice oily bubble where you get those fruity juicy esters coming out of the beer. So yeah, I think the fruity side of this one is kind of as we were picking up in the aroma. At the back of that front third of your palate, you're getting a wee bit of a kind of passion fruit, and as you come further forward, you're getting a wee bit of a more oily mango, and that's the Citra kind of showing its head. But as you push further forward, it's all about the kind of big, oily, tangerine oranges, and that's Mosaic, and it's Cryo Mosaic at that as well. So the Cryo Mosaic will kind of dominate a little bit in that sense, but you can almost feel that with the Cryo Mosaic, it just gives you a slightly candied orange as well, which is kind of interesting. But as you push towards the very front of the palate, you can feel it gets, the density of that oily fruity character gets even bigger, and that's when you get the limey character from the Motueka in this one, the New Zealand hop. And yeah, the Motueka does a nice job in this one. It just gives the beer a slightly bigger depth of flavour, but Citra is also going to contribute to the lemon limey notes in the beer, and you can maybe even pick up a little bit of gooseberry from the Citra in this as well. It's a common trait with Citra. But yeah, the level of oily fruity character you get in this one is actually quite impressive, and it's quite akin to what you would expect of a sort of West Coast IPA. So yeah, I like what it does, this beer, I have to say. I think that is safe to say. But I think we've said everything we really need to say about the flavour of this beer, so we can round off the review with the mouthfeel then. So I'd say that this beer, it's quite... it's definitely one of the more oily and thicker lagers that I've come across recently. So I'd say that for a lager beer, it's a big, full-bodied thing. But if we're talking about generally, I'd say this is kind of pushing towards the top end of mid-bodied, actually. It's quite a dense beer, this one, in terms of its flavour. But it still gives you that kind of lightness that you'd expect of a lager, which is why I say it's kind of mid to top of mid-bodied. So yeah, smooth carbonation, nice kind of wet mouthfeel in a sense, which is what you want. You do want a lager to be refreshing. In terms of hoppy bitterness, I don't find this beer overly bitter. I think this actually, it's got a bit of dankness to it, so I think it is about 30 IBUs, but there is a bit of dankness in there, which might be deceiving, but that could also be depending on how long the beer's been sitting. But I think it looks, by the looks of the date on it, it looks as if it's quite fresh actually, so I wouldn't worry about that. But yeah, the hoppiness in this one, it doesn't strike me as being overly bitter. And that's to do with the early edition hops, as we mentioned earlier. But I'd say, yeah, I think this is maybe about 30-ish IBUs, but quite a bit of dankness to the beer. And the fruity side of this beer, big and oily, which I like. The malt base has a bit of smoothness to it, there's a bit of graininess, and it's also got that big kind of oily, caramelly character and a bit of a kind of more biscuity note to it as well. So some really interesting things going on in this beer, I have to say. I like this one, but I do get the impression that 71 Brewing know what they're doing when it comes to the malty lagers. So if you get the chance to try a Dunkel, a Doppelbock or something like this from 71, I think you'll be in for a treat. But this is a really interesting beer, and I would say it's one of the better done ones that I've had from them. Actually, I need to try a few more things from them, of course, because they are putting out a few more beers. I need to try like a stout or something. I don't think I've ever tried a stout from these guys, but this is certainly quite an interesting one and a well done one, I would say. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this review. This one was the Outer Galactic 7.5% Imperial Pilsner from 71 Brewing in Dundee. Really nicely done beer in my opinion. So yeah, as always, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from 71 Brewing, and we will no doubt return to these guys again quite soon. You can find quite a lot of 71 Brewing in Sainsbury's stores up here in Scotland, so if you want some of them, that's where to go, unless you're living in Dundee, I guess, or you have a good beer shop next to you. But yeah, thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll catch you guys in the next review. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.